All right, good evening. This is our regularly scheduled meeting for the Community Preservation Committee of November 17th, 2021. I am the chair, Peter Pingator. This meeting is being conducted remotely by Zoom application. Let me begin by, first of all, opening with a much shorter script. And then we'll see how that goes. I want to first begin by confirming that all members and persons we anticipate participating this evening, which would just be our members and our staff, are present and can hear me. And so I will begin by doing a roll call, or let me just, let's start by, I'll call your name and respond in the affirmative. Joe Barnes.
Here.
Artie Crocker.
Here.
Bob Dermody. Bob.
Here.
Thank you. Laura Dorfman.
Here.
Reg Foster.
Here.
Chris Ursel.
Present.
Jean McKnight.
Here.
And Rick Zambone.
Here.
Okay, and all are present, as is the chair. As I previously noted, we're conducting this meeting remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020. That order permitting public meetings that must comply with the requirements of the open meeting law to be conducted remotely has been extended to April 1, 2022. We are, as I noted, we're convening by Zoom app. Members of the public can follow along by using the link that is identified on the agenda posted on our town's website. Note that the meeting is being recorded. Some attendees are participating by video conference. Be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and that you should take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Your meeting materials should have been posted, or I will otherwise on our website. Otherwise, I will note during the meeting if they have not. And let me cover our usual ground rules. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will ask each member in alphabetical order to make any comments, ask any questions, or make any motions. Remember, in order to create a clean transcript, to state your name. So either I will call you by name, or you should identify yourself by name for the record. You may want to consider muting your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Remember to speak clearly. And remember that all of our votes will be done by roll call vote pursuant to the applicable statute. All right, first item on our agenda is the chairman's updates. I think that I have three. One is that I did attend the select board's meeting on last Tuesday, I believe, and on 11/9, and presented to them basically the status of our request to work on amending the CPA plan. The select board, as I pointed out, basically has some say in each of those kind of four main areas that we're looking for input from this key stakeholders. We discussed the requests that we're making of the select board. We gave a little presentation. Rick Zambone was in attendance, as was Artie Crocker, and as was Jean McKnight. I asked Jean and Rick in particular to attend because they're helping me on the CPA plan. I'm kind of as a subgroup, as you know. So, the select board was receptive. I think it was helpful because it allowed me to kind of work on the presentation that we'll be making to the various boards and kind of refine and succinctly state what our request is and come up with kind of clear and concise request. I think what came out of that was that they understood that they were going to come up with a priority list of what they needed or what they would like to see in each of those particular areas that CPA funds, and that those would be communicated to us by the staff of Kate Fitzpatrick in a writing for us to insert, but our staff would help us with that. There was a request by one select board member, Dan Matthews, for me to review the CPA plan and make the entire plan, let's call it 24 pages or so, and create a red line of some things that he thought were just language that was outdated and other kind of clear modifications that we should make. And then what we would be working from a red line format, which kind of makes sense to me. So Rick, Jean, Artie, if you have anything to add, would you, raise your hand or note? I guess I'll start with Jean. Do you have anything to add to that? No. Jean?
I'm sorry. No, I don't have anything to add, Peter.
Okay, good. And Artie and then Rick, do you have, either of you have anything to add? Just to update the committee.
Nothing necessary at this point.
Okay, and Rick.
The only thing I would add, Peter, is we did get into a little bit of discussion about what their priorities and goals are. And you can correct me, but it seemed that their primary focus was to get funding for Emory Grover. And then they, as a kind of a second priority, they talked about they appreciated what we had done with respect to affordable housing, and that would be one of their priorities. But they kind of reserved anything. They didn't want to try and steer us anywhere. They just wanted to talk about some of the things they saw immediately in front of them.
Yeah, they're a great catch, Rick. And I think both Dan Matthews and Chris Gersel made it, Maparelli made a reference to the overwhelming support of that was shown at town meeting for the Emory Grover project. They made a reference to that, and basically we're pretty explicit about the fact that was their biggest priority. But they then, and of course, next to that was an acknowledgement of the work that we had done as a committee in doubling the funding for the community housing bucket. Can I pause just for a moment? And I have a question for our recording secretary. Did my roll call in the beginning, did that qualify as roll call, what I had conducted, Kristen?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. All right. And did we have, the other question I have for our recording secretary is, was Chris Gersel present at all during this meeting? Has he? Yeah, there's Chris now, but he's not, I see, we don't see him on the screen. Is that what's going on?
Yes, he responded that he was present.
Okay, and the same for Reg Foster.
Same for Reg Foster, yes.
Okay, so one thing that I will say is I think that telephoning, telephone contact with the meeting complies with their Zoom application. I will just note, just because I've said this before, Reg is new to this, that my preference would be that we do keep our video on if possible. But I do acknowledge that just being in connection telephonically is consistent. Okay, is consistent with the act. But it's you must be in contact by telephone, or you must be able to hear as a committee member. But I would, as I said, I think it makes for better dynamic and to have the video on. Okay. All right. That's just my preference. Okay. All right. So now the next update issue is we had discussed having a member of the select board and the Nuwari committee come and present to us. And Rick, I think, was kind of going to contact Marcus. And I think, do we have an update on that, Rick? Is he going to be available to speak to us for next meeting? Because he was not available this meeting at another meeting scheduled at the same time. But was wondering if you were able to reach him and confirm that he could be available on December 8th.
He's in the process of checking his calendar.
Okay.
So I don't have any further than that.
Okay, and then as far as my last update on this kind of roadshow that I want to do, and to go to these key committees to get their input on amendments to the community preservation plan. I think it makes logical sense for us to go to the Park and Rec committee next, and so I'll send them an email. I've already asked Chris Gersel to get us on their agenda. And I'll just send them a formal email probably, and we'll have a report. We'll go on to the next. And I think the Needham Housing Authority is right there next to Park and Rec. So we'll see if we can get these meetings going, and at least 2 of these meetings, conferences prior to our next December 8th meeting. Okay. All right, that's it on chairman's announcements. Emery Grover update. I think that we kind of gave you that update, if you will, on the in chairman's announcements. Everybody, I think everyone here is a town meeting member. Could be wrong about that, but I believe everyone is. And so you're aware of the fact that the Emery Grover warrant article passed on a voice vote for which required 2/3 vote. And that was the request for design funds. So I would, of course, anticipate that they'll be here, they'll make an application on December 1, and that's going to be part of our work. And so just kind of assuming that, I think we should keep the same principals who were involved, the same liaisons who were involved, should be involved on this go round. And that would be Professor Dermody, architect, and Joe Barnes, Dr. Barnes, professor and doctor. We have an impressive.
Please call me Bob, Peter.
Yeah, we don't make house calls, Peter, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Moving on.
I'm not, I'm acknowledging your, training success.
Duly noted.
Okay. All right.
Peter,
Okay.
can I ask a
Yes.
question?
Sure. Joe.
So it would seem to make sense, correct me if I'm wrong, that we would hold off on any type of discussion about where we're going as a committee until we get the application in hand. Is that correct?
Yeah, we need to have all the applications. So we're going to have I think we may have some surprises. We may have some things that we expect. And so I think kind of heard informally that we're going to have a request from Park and Rec concerning Claxton Field. We've heard informally that we're going to have multiple requests from the Housing Authority. And we've heard pretty explicitly that we're going to get a request from the Needham schools for Emery Grover. So we're going to wait and see. One other announcement. Sorry about this, but you got this in your packet. You should have gotten a PDF. You do have a PDF of what the distributions were from the Massachusetts Trust Fund. So you'll see that the distributions were basically double what we had anticipated. And instead of receiving roughly $500,000 as the CPA Trust Fund match, we're going to be receiving, I believe, $1.1 million. I think that's what it is. But you'll see that in the spreadsheet. So that's good news. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Zimbo.
I had the good fortune to run in at Dave Davison at Town Hall the other night, and he indicated that as a result of that, we can anticipate a warrant article in the spring town meeting to readjust the buckets on a dollar basis. So
Yeah.
just
So
so that the staff knows that, they can keep that in mind.
Yeah, so what, for those of you, this is one of the nuances. We allocate funds based on anticipated receipts in the following fiscal year. And those anticipated receipts are property tax receipts and the state match. And so that allocation, 20, in this case, 22% for housing and 10% for 11% for open space, and then actually 11%, but it ends up being 0 for historic. If we get more than significantly much more than we anticipate, we're gonna have to make an adjustment. We did that last year as well. Okay, so in this instance, we're gonna be making an adjustment. Okay. Now, next up, well, actually, why don't we do this? Let's deal with the approve the meeting minutes, and then we can just spend some time on our CPC plan, because Laura put some work in, and it's I think it's kind of one of those things. I think one of the things that I learned from Rick in dealing with the question of housing and addressing the housing bucket was we started just working on the process. So we work a little bit, we meet, we think, we move the ball along. Okay, and I think this is Laura's taken the first stab at trying to make revisions to our CPA plan, and I think it's worth it for us to spend a little bit of time on that to keep us get us thinking and coming up with a plan to keep moving the ball forward. So let's take out of order. Let's go with the meeting minutes that Kristen has provided to us, and those are the meeting minutes for June 30th, 2021. I assume everyone has had them and reviewed them. We have a motion to approve the June 30th, 2021 meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
although I wasn't at the June 30th meeting because I was no longer on the board, there's something in the minutes that I don't understand, and I wonder if it is a mistake.
All right. Why don't we do this? Let's make the motion and then we can have a discussion. Does that make
Okay.
sense? Okay, so let's have the motion first. I'll make the
So moved.
motion. Okay, and Mr. Dermody has seconded the motion. Now we'll open it up to discussion. Okay, Ms. McKnight, discussion.
Yes, and the item that's on the first page with the title revisions to the Needham CPC plan, second paragraph. Mr. Pingatore stated that the most recent study was completed in Manchester in March 2021. What does the reference to Manchester mean?
Okay, so I think that that should be a reference to the most recent plan that I had reviewed. Is that what, Kristen?
That's accurate. This
Okay.
was back in June. We were discussing where the plan was. Mr. Pignator stated that the most recent plan that he had found was from Manchester, Massachusetts, and was produced in March of 21.
Okay, so let's.
Very
sorry.
recent plan.
But Jean, you make a good point. So we could pass this with minor modifications. So we could change the word study to and insert the words plan reviewed. Okay, most recent, I'll call it CPA plan reviewed, was completed in Manchester. Okay, fair enough. Does that make sense to you, Jean?
Yeah, and you might even add Manchester MA.
Okay, good. A good point too. Excellent.
I was thinking you happened to be in Manchester when you were working on it.
I could have been in Manchester, England. And I've
Is
been
it Manchester, Mass, or is it Manchester by the Sea?
Oh, if it's Manchester by the Sea, I can tell you, having been town council there, that they want to be known as Manchester by the Sea.
Hence
Well,
my question, Gene.
Okay, so I think it's obvious to me we don't have enough on the agenda, but we will put in Manchester by the Sea, Massachusetts. Okay. All right. All right. Can't wait for those applications to come in.
Well, we wouldn't want someone calling Needham need.
That's okay.
All right, I'll
Moving
stop.
on, Moving on.
Okay. All right. So okay, so that was a proposed change by Jean McKnight. And so we'll note that. And I know Jean wasn't even at the meeting. She picked that up. So that's pretty good. All right. Any other comments? No, okay, so let's have a vote. We have to do a roll call vote. All those in favor, signify by saying, well, let's go through the roll call. Barnes,
Aye.
Crocker,
Aye.
Dermody,
Aye.
Dorfman,
Aye.
Foster,
Abstain.
nice. McKnight.
Aye.
No, Jean, were you on the, I'm sorry, Jean. I don't
No,
mean,
I wasn't on the committee. If you think I
So-
should vote, I will.
no, you
abstain.
abstain. You should abstain. Okay. Chris Gersel,
Oh, aye.
okay.
Alive,
And
alive.
Zimbone,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay, next, let's move on to our revisions to the Needham CPC plan. And I'll just set the table a little bit. So just to remind you that Laura has taken on the task of looking at and proposing changes to the application itself. And so in connection with that, we had a discussion in our prior meeting about what we should be asking for, what we would be looking for in those initial stages. One of the requests that came up, I think, was more information for us to address the issue of whether or not the applicant and the subject is subject to funding of the CPA. What should I'll turn that over to Laura. I'll turn it over to you. And I guess what I was thinking in terms of, we'll get to this eventually, but I was thinking that whatever comments and proposed revisions we have, we should be tracking, in a red line format, our current application, our current application process, and our current plan. So that was which make it easier for us to kind of work our way through it. But I still think I think it's good if Laura can present us, maybe starting with the cover, starting with maybe the shortest one first, and then walk us through what your thinking was and proposed changes were, and we can then make some comments and use this as a kind of a springboard to move the issue forward. Okay. Make sense?
Okay. Yeah. So my thinking, just as an overview, was to look at other similar like towns applications, not plans, by the way, this just with regard to the application. And to see what was easy to follow and what seemed to make sense to me. And so I probably jumped the gun a little bit because I didn't start with redlighting our plan. I just kind of looked at what I thought would be an easier set of documents for people to follow. So what I did was create 3 documents. One was a cover sheet that just described the overall project. Second was the process. And then the third was some specific questions, which I was thinking we could use this year as follow-up questions, as we discussed at the last meeting. We don't have time to change the application for this year, but maybe we can create a document to get more specific information after the initial project submissions. So that was my thought process.
Why don't we turn to let's go to each document. Like, can we do that?
Yeah.
And you just kind of walk us through that.
Yep.
And
So on the cover, yep.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
So the cover sheet, I think you guys, can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So the cover
Are you
sheet.
screen sharing, Laura?
Oh, no, I'm not. I can. Celia, I think, sent them out, but do you want me, or do you want
No,
Celia to screen share?
No,
Can
that's okay. I just thought when you said look at, I thought you were screen sharing. Sorry.
Well, maybe it would be good to, Celia, can you screen share the cover sheet? That might be helpful, Jean.
Mm.
While she's doing that, I want to say, Laura, thanks for taking this on. I've gone through the documents that you've submitted, and obviously you said you used other towns, but despite
Well,
that.
I tried to combine a little bit of both.
I think it's excellent so far from what I've seen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's very nice of you. Thank you, Joe.
I also agree with Joe's comments, but you don't have to thank me.
Of course, I'll thank you. All the times I call you for help. Thanks, I appreciate that. I understand that it would be easier to just take what we have in red line. And so maybe the next step, because this doesn't have to be done now, is really to do that, or to do it more of a comparison so you could see where the differences are. Celia, can you open the one that says draft of application cover sheet? This is our existing one, but there is an attachment in that you sent out. It says draft of application cover sheet.
Yes, let me grab that. Sorry, I figured you guys didn't want
no,
to see
that's-
my million emails that I had opened. So make sure I'm opening the right one.
And Peter, while Cecilia's doing that, a question on the body of the plan itself, and making all of those rather mundane, not necessarily substantive red lines on that document. Have you started that, or has anybody started that yet?
No, but I think that's on me. And so I'm going to start that. Is that okay?
Well, I was going to volunteer to take the first cut at that.
Great.
And the only reason being is I'm going to find myself with time on my hands after this coming Saturday. So
Great. That's,
you know,
so
I can
I
spend
think
some
that,
time doing that.
all right. I think that, so there's a Word document. I circulated those in Word form, so you can go through that and create a red line document, and we'll work from your red line. Okay. That's fantastic.
Knowing you're employed and working,
Yeah, well,
trying to earn a living.
I appreciate that greatly. Okay. So,
Okay.
all right, let's go through
So-
go ahead.
Yeah, so basically this is just, it's 2 pages. There's a third page in this because I didn't delete an empty second page. And this is part of our current application form. And it has a lot of the same things, but the things that are a little bit different is it asks for, in the costs and funding section, it kind of breaks it out by year. And asks for what other funding sources are, which I think is something lacking in our application. I think that should be a question up front. Do you have any other way of getting money for this project? So this kind of takes care of that. And Reg, jump in anytime you want. Takes care of that right out of the gate.
Hey, Laura, can you go back to the first page?
Yeah.
So, scroll down to the bottom. The other, you're a little more detail too on current owner.
Yeah, the actual site address.
The actual site. I mean, that I
Yeah.
think that's in, the rest of that information on the first page is in our current application.
Correct.
But a
Right.
little more detail on the project site. And the next page, the grid, which really just puts it right out there, which is, okay, what is the funding? I think our current application has something like deadlines, which the current,
Well, it just says amount requested and estimated cost, but it doesn't break it down by year or anything like that.
right. So I
And
do
so
think,
this just more detail.
yeah, I think the cost and funding is a good insert. And so if you could work with, the other thing too is that I think that we can let our staff kind of deal with the finer problems of getting formatting correct and coordinating the different iterations. But I think that you can, we're all facile enough with the technology to create a red line and cut and paste and put this grid in where you think it should go in our current application, and make any other red lines you think are appropriate in our current application.
So the thing with that is I feel like this should be a separate document. That's just my opinion.
What
But
does
if you
that
feel
mean?
it's, in other words, right now we have well, we really have one, but what's on our website is 2 documents. We have our 2-page initial eligibility project form, and then
Right,
we have our process.
right.
I feel that we should have, this is a cover sheet, which is separate from those 2 things.
But this is just, but that would just be, this is duplicative of what that what that application is. This has 90%. This is actually is like 100% of what's in that
Yeah, I
application.
mean, we could certainly add it to the application, but there's other data that I would add to the application too. I'm just trying to be,
I don't
as
know.
I said to you,
Go ahead.
yeah. I'm looking at this from someone, not from where we sit. I'm looking at this from the point of view of someone applying, right? And I'm trying to make it succinct and easy. And I feel like what we have now is very wordy and lengthy. And so that was just my thought. I am totally open to whatever all of you want to do. And we can certainly take this cover sheet and redline our doc and add this stuff in there. It's totally fine. It's
All right,
just a
that
matter
would
of
be my,
preference.
I mean, I'm open to suggestions on this, but that would be my suggestion because, and I think that the application process that's where I think actually our application process is great. I think that it could be redlined and there can be some additional things in there, but I kind of like it. So what
Okay.
one of the complaints, so I would start with, I would keep it to one application. And then of course, what we're talking about is that we're going to request some supplemental and we were going to request a little more detailed documentation in the beginning that would assist us on question of whether or not it's subject to funding under the act. And then we would be quickly asking them the applicant for additional information. And that would be outlined in our application process. It is kind of already there, but that's how I had envisioned it. I could be wrong. Okay, but but again, I would try to work with the current 2-page application, which does it have, are you saying it doesn't ask for enough information or it asks for?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't?
It's the questions are too general. It doesn't ask for enough. And so instead of saying, we may ask you for information afterwards, you might as well just tell them what they're going to need from the get-go, in my opinion.
Fine, do that. I think that was one of our complaints. We had one of the applications that we got at last go round was very, very vaguely drafted. And it took us a number of meetings and interactions with the applicant to actually get to what it was that they were asking for the money. It's like, I don't want to play that game. I would like to have that.
So if you just give, there's basically, Peter, 2 questions that would have detail, number 9 and number 10, because the whole first page, question 1 is applicant name, question 2. Those aren't questions, in my opinion. But so the real meat of it is on page 2. And when you give someone 2 questions and a whole bunch of white space, you're most times going to not get everything you need because it's not specific enough. And people are going to typically take a shorter route and just put basic information until they're asked for more. So that's how I feel.
I would pour the specifics that you want into our application. That's what I would say. That's really my suggestion.
May I offer some additional views?
Sure.
Please.
So
I'm violating the Regis rule, which is I should be speaking last. So I apologize for that.
So I thought, first of all, I'd raise it up a 2-page form out of the weeds. So that's kind of a joke. Okay. But I think I served, helped Laura, mainly as a sounding board because, it's just helpful to have somebody that can bounce things off of here. But to me, the issue for our committee is our process, which is, do we want to continue to do what we do now, which is to have a very brief initial application, whether you call it a cover sheet or whatever else you call it, that isn't 10 or 20 pages or whatever, and, not too much blank white space, whatever, and go through a cycle of sort of initial evaluation in December. And then as a follow-up on that, by the end of our last meeting in December, whenever that is, we get back to the applicant saying, here's all the additional information that we would like to have with respect to their application. Or do we try to front end load more information into that sort of initial application? And, you can argue it both ways. And, the research that Laura did which was quite a bit, is you can see it in both ways in other, example communities that she went and looked for here. And, the argument you can make, if Cecilia can scroll down a little bit, is that, that we ask in our current application for, 100 words or less. What is it that this project is all about? And 100 words and less, why do we care about it? How does it do good for Needham? What is the applicability basically to the goals set forth in the to be updated, Community Preservation Act plan for Needham? But we kind of try to limit it to that 100 words or less. I can tell you, having, as Peter gave a sneak preview, we'll probably be having 4 applications coming in 2 weeks. 100 words or less is pretty hard to comply with, and get something that really kind of describes the essence of what you're trying to do. But it is a kind of a discipline that you put on the applicants that can be useful to, so we don't have hundreds of, or dozens of pages of things to look at, at our December 8th meeting. The other thing that, I think Laura and I sort of discussed is this table that we're looking at right now, that in our current application, what we asked for, which is just total project funding, and then how much we're asking for this from the CPA, that's a little bit oversimplified. Especially, if one of our criteria is leveraging the limited amount of CPA funds that we have. And so it would be worth sort of expanding that out sort of in the way that you sort of saw in this table. Not the other funding sources is not is really, supposed to be the other funding that will contribute to the total project cost that will come from something else else than or otherwise from the CPA funds. On the theory that, we generally would favor, applicants who, I'll pick on the Charles River Center in 2014 or 2013, where they came in and said, we want to fund a new group home on South Street. And ultimately it wound up, I believe, if my memory serves me, that they were asking for somewhere around $500,000 from the CPA funds, but they were going to fundraise from their own constituency the other $500,000. And, that's something that, consistently we look on and say that is a good thing, given that we only have so many CPA dollars to spread around to everything. So, but I think, again, the fundamental thing is, do we want to sort of ask for a more complete application that comes in on December 1st, or do we want to continue sort of the abbreviated application for December 1st, and then follow up with a part 2 response that says, before we recess for the rest of the holiday period, here's all the other stuff we'd like to see from you, and let the applicant work on that over the holiday period and deliver it to us sometime in January. So, I guess I'm saying, what is the current CPC members, do you like this sort of 2-part process, or do you think we should get more robust about what we asked for in the initial application?
All right, so why don't we go around? Well, we'll have some hands up, so we'll go with hands up. Gene McKnight's hand is up, and then I'll ask. We'll give everyone an opportunity to speak. Okay, Gene.
Yes, I agree with Reg. Oh, wait a minute, what's this? I agree with Reg on the 2-part process we have now, although I hesitate to offer comments in general because I haven't been through that process as a member of the Community Preservation Committee. But just thinking about it from the point of view of an applicant, it seems that being able to put in what I think we've referred to as a placeholder to outline what project you have in mind, what is the amount of funds you're looking for. Most particularly is, and we label our old form, or the one we're using now, initial eligibility project application form. The focus on, is this a project that's eligible for CPA funds? And then I happened to be looking at their website for the Community Preservation Alliance, and I found a form for the town of Agawam. And under the eligibility, it calls it Community Preservation Eligibility Determination Form, and then has a paragraph saying what the purpose of this form is, to make sure that all project applications are eligible for funding. And then refers the applicant to the, I didn't look at their instructions the way we have the instructions, but that's what I assume they're referring to. But I just want to say that I think the two-part system is a good one. When I look at what's proposed by Laura, for example, this one that's on the screen now, costs and funding, it seems like to me that's very hard for an applicant to determine right off and fill this in properly, unless it's pretty simple. Fiscal year 22, a certain amount of money, CPS funds requested a certain amount of money. But otherwise, it strikes me as kind of difficult. So that's all. Except one more thing, my last comment. I think it's important, even in the project eligibility form, to have something, for example, what is said on the Agawam form in the instructions. You have to have the documentation that you have control over the site. And then, what do you have? Purchase and sale agreement, option deed. And this is, if the project is town-owned real estate, whether the applicant, excuse me, I misread. The applicant or co-applicant must be the town board or department in control of the land. And I think it's worthwhile saying that somewhere right up front. And then you put down in the form that, owner, you'd say town of Needham, jurisdiction, Conservation Commission, or Park and Recreation Commission, whatever board has jurisdiction over the land.
Okay. So that looks like, all right, so any other comments? So the question really that we're discussing is, and I think it did come out of our last discussion in our prior meeting, was this kind of two-step process with a focus on the front end being eligibility, and then and kind of a request that whatever detail that we're asking for, I'm just relating back to what our old discussion was, whatever detail, some detail that would assist us in addressing the issue of eligibility, and then some kind of canned or set questions that we send out if we determine eligibility. So that was our prior, that was our discussion where in our prior meeting. Red just brought that up again. Any other comments? And then with respect to that, how do people feel about that? Rick, your hand is up.
Yeah, Peter, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe I'm misunderstanding the discussion, but I thought what Laura had here was in essence a two-part process, that this document was the first initial document. And then the other two documents is the more detailed application. And then the whole list of questions that the liaisons would be handing the applicant and said, you know, here's all the things that we need to know in order to fully evaluate your project. And that was my understanding. Am I missing something?
No, I think I was gonna ask, that was my next question I was gonna ask for Laura. Because I think that's what I think that's what your intent was to do, correct, Laura? Or is it?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
that's what Reg and I talked about, you know, focusing on a revised application and instructions, but also a separate set of questions for follow-up.
Okay,
That were,
so,
yeah.
all right, so, and I think what you're getting is some feedback that some of this, the grid, the finance, the financial grid, that's a good idea, but maybe that shouldn't be in the initial application. And that site control is maybe a good question for the initial, and evidence of site control may be a good initial question in the first application. But there's not, I don't think there's any criticism or any suggestion that what you're putting out there isn't a good idea. It's a question of, should that be in that first application? And Laura, when you were looking at this first round, I would guess I'm a little confused about this. Were you looking for more detail? Were you constructing it so that there would be more, and or would it be detail that could be easily identified kind of in a bullet format? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I personally don't like the format of ours. So I was looking to make it a little more succinct and organized. For example, in the process that we describe, we do steps and there's a lot of narrative. And I was just trying to say, here's the steps. And then another section, and here's reference to the uses of the funds, rather than just refer someone constantly to the CPA plan, which is not, it's kind of not convenient for someone all the time. I mean, yes, they should always refer to that, but it's nice if you can see generally what the buckets are for, right? So it was reorganization, and it was getting a little more information above and beyond what was in our initial application eligibility form.
All right.
So it's a little bit of both.
Can I jump in and supplement that? I think on the cost and funding thing, one of the things especially when we talk about this part 2 of the application that we're about to talk about, the question is, do we just want to have a one-liner like what we have now, which is total cost of the project and how much CPA funds are you asking? Or would it be useful to ask for a little bit more granularity, at that initial stage when you spread things out over time? So let's look at a couple of examples. A lot of projects just, you ask for money, let's say digitizing the records at the town clerk's office, one of our previous projects here. You're going to ask for money. They're going to spend, if it was now, they'd spend it in 2022 and they'd be done. Okay. And they're not going to have any matching source from anywhere else. They just want 100% of it funded from the CPA. Projects like the Needham Housing Authority, if you look at them historically in the 2000s or even recently, we'll ask for money, but we may be spending it over a couple of years, 2 or 3 years into the future, current example. And there will be other funding sources that come from non-CPA sources, non-town sources. So do you want that in the initial application, just as a point of information? And then there's a third sort of more extreme type, like the town hall funding, or I think we'll see it in the Emery Grover, where they're asking for funding where the total cost is a large number that is going to be bonded. So it's out over a number of different years of demand on CPA dollars. And I'm just hypothesizing about what will come up. We haven't made a decision, but the CPA funds are only going to be a portion of that total cost, and the rest of it is going to come from somewhere else. So do we want to know at that initial application, from the school system, that when they're asking us for 12 million, or the project is 20 million, just picking numbers, current rough numbers here, and they're asking us for 6 million, that, the other 12, at 14 million is, what is the other funding sources for that, at least hypothesized from the general fund or what have you. So, that was what we were kind of grappling with when when Laura and I were kind of, doing brainstorming over this. What is the appropriate level, one size fits all initial application, appropriate level of detail? And like I said, I just noticed that somehow it fell off of this trap, but I think we both like the relevance to Needham, the section that says, why do we care about this? How does this benefit Needham and the community preservation plan, which isn't, I just noticed tonight.
Oh, that's on, Rich, that's on the questions, the follow-up questions.
Maybe
form.
what's on the follow-up questions, do we want to know that up front? I think is the question for the board.
Well, I think see,
Committee.
most of this information that is here, I've said this, now I'm going to say this maybe a third time, is actually asked for in our initial eligibility project application form.
Right.
It may be in a form where people can duck it and give us a lot of things that don't really answer the question. But question 10 is, in 100 words or less, provide a brief statement of the need for and the benefits to the community.
Right.
It's the same question. We want that same, that's the information that we want. We probably should recast that question. I'm kind of, if we're kind of knocking around these ideas, I really am kind of with Gene on this idea. I mean, really what we were trying to do was, I thought what came out of our last meeting was initial application is really an eligibility application, but we need some additional information. And I think what Laura has been saying is a legitimate point, which is we're not quite getting it when we ask these open-ended narratives, and maybe we can ask for some specific information, but not to the point where we're burdening them with the whole project budget over a 6-year period. I don't know that that's what we need to address the question of eligibility, which is what I thought we were trying to do in the first go round. And then I think one of the examples that you gave, Reg, was congratulations, we find you eligible. Now you have to provide us with all this other information. And it's a standard set, a pretty standard set. Well, and we're looking at, the bullet point information that we list as information that we may request as under page 5 of the application process, and kind of turning that into a standard document request that we would turn around pretty quickly after our December 8th meeting as information that we need, along with the other questions that Laura's come up with. She's got great questions, but that's kind of how I would approach it. I think we're all kind of grappling with it, but we're all kind of in the same ballpark, right? I mean, is there anyone out there who disagrees with the fact that we should be doing this kind of two-step? But the first initial step, maybe we need a little more clarity and some consistency in the information that we get. Is that kind of where we're at? And I guess for me,
Good.
Excuse me, Peter.
Yes, go ahead, Bob.
If everybody's okay, could we stop screen sharing? We've been, I just want to see all your smiling faces. Thank you.
You know what I realized is you can actually play around with the application yourself and get everybody smiling faces.
Oh, I have been.
Oh, okay. All right. So, okay. So with that, are we done with, so with that, have we reached some kind of consensus where, is that the kind of principle, if you will, that we're going to, that's going to guide us on the two pieces of paper that we're looking for, that we're going to be putting together as part of the application process? Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, in general, I agree. And thank you, Laura, for the work on this. if we take the approach of an eligibility step, we have to balance the request for enough information to determine eligibility without being too onerous on an applicant, if they're not eligible. So I'd like to stick with that sort of two-step process. Enough to determine eligibility, but give them a heads up with a link, like if you're eligible, this is everything we're going to be asking for. So FYI.
So I'm going to use as an example, and one of the, I use Reg's phrase. I'm going to pick on the application for the town reservoir from last year. That it took us quite a bit of interaction with the applicants to actually understand that the scope of the request involves things like going off the reservoir, up and deal with things like catch basins and pipes, etc., infrastructure related stuff that we later determined wasn't subject to the act. But it took us quite a bit of effort on our part to come up with that information. And what I would like to do is actually create a process, like have that initial application really deal with that, so that we're not spending a lot of time with back and forth on that, trying to uncover that information on our own through due diligence, which is information that should just be presented to us and become self-evident. So that would be kind of my goal on this initial application process. And I think what, some of the information that Laura requests, it's pretty directed, if you will. So I kind of like that approach, but in terms of formatting, I would like to work with the initial eligibility application that we have and kind of work from that.
Peter, I think you identified actually a specific question that isn't asked in our current application. The first one is describe the project. The second one is, how is this relevant to the Needham CPA plan? And the third one that you just articulated is, I think, is interesting, which is, state specifically, I'm making this up, but state specifically why you think this is eligible for CPA funding. I've not been around the committee for a few years, so I don't know what has come in recently for people who put applications in that actually just don't qualify for CPA funding, like it's something for maintenance, or it isn't, sufficiently, covered by the CPA application. Is that what CPA statute? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I think that what happens is Laura is touching on this, which is, when we ask an open-ended question like project summary in 100 words or less, a summary of the project, we could get 2 sentences that says, repair fields behind DPW, but it's actually, it's repair drain pipe that's running underneath the field. So we want to kind of tease that out so that at least we're aware of what it is exactly that the applicant is requesting the funds, and what the actual scope of the project is, and what is the project. So I think that I would like to know that as part of that initial application process, so that we can have a candid, discussion about it and whether or not it does fit under the act. The act is very flexible, Reg. There's a lot of things that can fit underneath it. And there really are. There are some red lines that we've, or some matters that we've determined through our own research have been challenged on the floor of town meeting in other towns. And we've gotten some guidance from the Community Preservation Alliance. The language of the act is pretty flexible, and it's probably intended to be so. But we want to get as much of that information out as we can on the front end. So I think we're kind of balancing, but it's yes, Laura.
So there's a question in the follow-up question document, which says, indicate how the category specific criteria for the CPA are met. And that if you don't like this 3-document thing, then we could take some of these, like a question like that, and put it in the initial application eligibility form. There's some questions in there you can look at. There's a
And
few
maybe
we
move it
don't
around.
have.
Right, right.
So there's 3 questions we don't have. That's one. One is an action plan and timeline, which I think is a fair ask if we're serious about a project. And the other is what other funding sources are available.
But I think those
Um,
last 2 questions do not go to eligibility. Those are follow-up questions.
That's what I said.
Yeah,
I said
yeah.
that.
Okay,
yeah.
right.
But I think the first one could go in the eligibility application, how
And
it specifically meets CPA requirements. And to that end, I created this document which explains what the criteria is and just gives categories of the buckets rather than saying, please refer to the CPA plan, which we don't reference what the buckets mean in this document anywhere. You know, we don't say housing and bullet points, open space bullet point. We say refer to the plan. And I think that's not really fair. I mean, I think it's to give them, and maybe it's follow-up, I don't know.
Well, that's
document.
why I would ask those questions in my due diligence. I would ask those questions as part of the due diligence.
You wouldn't want to give somebody that information as part of the
Sure.
application process?
No, I absolutely, I think it's fine. I mean, I'm a little, I can't, let's see, what are you scrolling through now? Now
No, those are Chris, those are the follow-up question, or the questions. But there's another document called draft of project submission guidelines. And that's where it explains, it's like our application and instructions packet. So it just explains how it works. And then if you can go down a little bit, it explains what to do in the steps, right? Which we do. But then down below, it just gives general criteria. And then it says, if you want more information, you refer to the plan. We don't have any of that at all in our process document.
all right.
So that's up to you. I don't want to make it too lengthy. I tried to shorten it with the steps because our steps get very, long. But we could shorten the steps, and maybe if people agree, just give them a point of reference or not. That's up to everybody else. I just thought that's helpful for somebody.
All right, so let's, what we discussed now, we haven't gotten into detail about the additional questions, but those, I think where we're at procedurally is initial eligibility application. We've gotten some feedback on that.
We're going to take out the table of costs on that, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to add how
and-
it meets CPA requirements.
Right, and then I think what we'll do is what I've done in the past. This is one of those things where people can give you additional red line information. Can we do that and comply with our? I think if we can go off meeting and you can do one way to Laura red line comments on her work, but only communicate to Laura. Do I have that right? Do you think, I just want to be compliant with the open meeting law on that. Because what I want to do is give everyone an opportunity, think about what we've come up with here tonight. And you want to noodle through these 3 documents and compare them to the 2 documents. Actually, the 3 documents that the 2 documents that we have in a part of the application process. Provide additional comments to Laura. You can do that in a red line format. Does that make sense?
Peter, we could also put off everything but the questions, because we have a whole year to do the application, right?
Yeah.
So we can really just focus on the follow-up questions now, if that's easier. And because we know we're using our current form now. So what we really need next is the follow-up questions. That was my takeaway from the last meeting.
Okay.
I did it this way for my own. I don't know why I did it this way, but that's why.
Well, you have to look
All right, well
at it
then,
in
let's do
context.
this then. Let's do the follow-up. Let's everyone take home the follow-up questions. And we can, you can add to them and provide comments regarding them to Laura for further discussion at our December 8th meeting, because the December 8th meeting is an eligibility meeting. We could finalize those questions at that point. And those, and that's really what we're doing there is a kind of in court system, we would call it the automatic disclosure rules, which is you're eligible. Now you're going to automatically disclose all this information. Here's your standard list. And then we can do additional due diligence questions after that. So what we wanted, I think, does that make sense to you, Reg and Laura? You've been giving us a lot of thought.
Yes, I won't be here, I don't think, for the next meeting.
December 8th.
Yeah,
So as a process,
but I can get the doc, I can gather, sorry, right, I can gather everything and share it, of course, way ahead of time, of course. I just wouldn't be here for that night.
Yeah, we can't do that. We can't do the sharing. We can get, it has to be, we need to share information at our meeting.
Right,
that-
I can gather the comments prior and
Yep.
then work with Reg and he can share them at the meeting.
yeah, we can aggregate, but we cannot deliberate, to put it in the vernacular of the open meeting log here. So we can act as staff members to aggregate. But it's the extent that we start, and as our quorum here, how many people are on the meeting, on the CPC right
We have
now?
our quorum is 5.
5.
right.
So, as long as we're 4 or less, 2 of us can work together as a subcommittee
Right,
to
like
put
we have
it
been,
together and
right,
not, I think, foot fault on the open meeting law, but we can't, can't discuss it more broadly with everybody else or
Right.
without
but I'm not,
doing
yeah,
it in an open meeting.
So we can
So I
provide.
think there are 2 things we're talking about is the process, and I think we're fine. And I think, again, the other question I'd like to make sure we don't leave unintended is the nature of this second part here. Because we have a sort of draft from Laura, again, drawing upon looking at what other towns are doing. But I think there's a couple more points of discussion there, but I think the
Right.
process is good.
All right, but let's just get the process in place, okay? You raise a good point. So I just want to make sure I got the process right. We want further input on what the standard questions are going to be once eligibility is determined. That's what we want, right? That's our goal. Okay. So Laura's come up with some questions. I know I have some input that I want to give. So where I want to direct that, you know what else? This is what we should do. The information has to go through our staff. That's the way to deal with it. Give it to Cecilia in a red line format. She can aggregate it and we will discuss it at our next meeting. Okay. It may not be perfect coming out of it, but we probably would have a pretty good working document that we could distribute to all of the applicants that we determine are eligible. And the reason why doesn't need to be perfect is because we have follow-up due diligence questions that the liaisons will do anyway. Right? Does that make sense, everyone?
Plus, we need a deadline.
Unless what, say that
I
again,
have
Rick?
I said plus, I'm sorry, Gene, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, you said plus we need a deadline?
Yeah, because if you look at the calendar, I would suggest that the deadline for people submitting their comments to Cecilia is November 26th. Because that gives a week after that, recognizing it's a holiday weekend, to kind of pull it together and get it out in advance of the December 8th meeting here.
Okay, you're saying in addition, Peter, we need a deadline.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. December 26, 11/26.
That works perfect.
11/26. That's Thanksgiving week, isn't it?
Well, that's why I was raising the point. We actually have a little bit challenged there because we have a early next meeting plus the holiday week in between. So I mean, we can pick a different date.
Well, we can have it a week in advance. Can't we get it to her 12:01? What's our deadline? What day of the week is that?
If you can get me edits by December 1st, that Wednesday, I should be able to compile them by that Friday, the 3rd, to get them out to you.
Okay, so that's 12:01. Okay. Now,
If you're planning on submitting a bunch of edits, if you want to get them to me a little earlier, that's fine too.
okay,
I have a question for clarification. We were also provided with the document that's also labeled draft, a ton of guidelines for project submission. And it has yellow highlighting. What's the special purpose for the yellow highlighting? Is that something? I just don't understand what we should be looking at
Those,
with the yellow.
those are items that were in other towns' categories of the buckets. There were bullet points from buckets. When I looked at our CPA plan, they did not include those yellow highlighted items, so I added them.
so these are it. Let me say what we have in the plan is we have a series of subjective factors that we consider in determining whether or not we fund. And what Laura has done is looked at other plans in other towns, found other subjective factors that other towns have and that she liked, that she thought should be considered to be that she thought should be considered
Yeah, I just put them out there for people to see
for
what they thought.
discussion. Okay, all right. So you didn't weigh you're not saying you're saying this is something in addition. Consider.
Yeah, I don't have the
Okay.
experience or the background to do that. I just was trying to give as much information as I could.
That's really helpful for me to know. I didn't realize that. Okay. And my comment on that is I would wait. My advice, well, again, I'm violating the rule here of speaking first, but Mike, let me express a concern. My concern is that we're going around and we're asking these stakeholders to give us what their priorities are and what the factual basis is for their priorities. And we're actually asking them, if you look in that email, we actually asked them for input on the subjective factors to be considered in funding their particular requests. And so I would like to get some input from them, like they're, because some of those subjective factors are really kind of the wish list that, kind of a concept, if you will, how we want the town to look eventually ends up being the kind of subjective factor rather than a specific, And so I would just I think this is great that Laura put this out there, but I also think during this process of amending the plan, we definitely want to get some input from the stakeholders on those subjective factors as well. And then we'll consider them all. But
So
right.
that, Peter, you're right. So these comments, these highlighted items would be more for the plan versus.
Right, but that's okay.
And I'm not trying to overstep into the plan. This is just when I looked at the town of Lexington and they had these buckets, I thought, oh, these are bullets we don't have. I'll throw them in here. One more comment before I forget. Is it possible for this committee to get its own email address like Reg has at the Housing Authority? Because we don't really have that. And I think emailing, that's a place where people can ask questions. That's one of the options in other towns. And so where would they email? Just Peter I think it would be nice to have one email box for this committee. I just wanted to put that out there before I forgot it.
That's a good question. Why don't we ask Cecilia to look into that, or Kristen, do we?
Yeah, I can see if we can do like a cpc@needhamma.gov or something like that.
Okay, that's a good question. All right, but that you really clarified for me what your goal was in that other document, which was if I can if I can restate it, it's that you were pulling out these subjective factors so that your average applicant doesn't have to go through 26 pages of text
Yeah,
and say, what are these, what do we need to look at? Right?
right,
Can we,
exactly.
so as long as the two are consistent and they should, it's almost like a little bit of a, not a cheat sheet, but it makes it a
Yeah,
little. easier.
exactly.
Right. Okay. I see that. All right. All right. So that's a good, we should hold on to that. That's a good document and we'll use that as on a going forward basis. And that's good. All right. All right. So
Question, Laura, if I may, Laura, you said you looked at Lexington's form in particular. Were there other towns you particularly looked at?
I looked at those that were represented on the CPA website, where you could actually see their
Mhm.
application
Okay.
and their plan. I did not go to every individual town website. I figured if the CPA thought they were worthy of posting, that they were worthy of reviewing. And there are a couple, I mean, I can go check now. There are a couple that were in Western Mass. There were, let me just see. I can tell you, I can give you the link where I found them. But no, I didn't go to each like town with this. I just went to I used the CPA website.
Mhm.
but Lexington is kind of a like town. and
Okay.
their
Well, that's what I
their-
thought.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
I thought the same thing. And so their plan is
Yeah.
listed in the Community Preservation Alliance, right, Laura? I mean, that's where,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
the like town. And then I looked at the Manchester one because it was the newest and shiniest, it was, but,
Let me
yeah.
just see, I can,
okay.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
All right, any other questions or comments? Do we have a sense of how we're going to proceed next with this?
can I just try to summarize it? We're gonna.
Yes,
the
that'd be
next-
great. Yeah.
Okay, and you'll reword it, which is fine. But the next step is for us to give comments on the follow-up question document to Cecilia by December 1st. Redlined comments, correct? Which will be discussed at the meeting of December 8th, at which I will not attend. Is that right?
That's
Did
right.
you want-
That's right, and I'm not going to that's correct. That is, to me, that's correct.
Okay. And we're going to table the rest of it until later.
I second everything she just said.
Well, we're driving forward. Well, not necessarily. Like the first initial eligibility application, you got some feedback on that, right? So you're not completely tabling that. You can drive that forward a little bit, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Could Cecilia send us all an explanation of our task? That I think would help.
Okay. All right. And what might be, and so do we have, Kristen, this is a question, I think, Kristen and Cecilia, did we have a Word version of the initial eligibility document? Did that get distributed, or did we only do that in PDF?
It's only sent in PDF. I can share so everyone can make the same from SharePoint. Everyone will see everybody's corrections.
I don't want to do that. All right, again, I want all that to be directed to Cecilia. We don't want to see corrections ahead of time. Let her aggravate it. So you know what, let's stick with what we have. If I can figure out.
We still need the Word docs, though. We still
We
need the
do.
Word format.
Yeah, people can, well, Kristen, people can download that document. We shouldn't use the SharePoint document. We should download it, create our own red line, and send it to Cecilia. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe-
But
Okay,
So.
can everybody convert? Sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
So we want emails of all three of the Word documents that Laura put together, as well as the current application in Word form. So 4
Correct.
documents. Am I missing a document there?
No, because our application and it's all one document. We cull it out, we separate out the initial application form from the, process, but it's really one document. On the website, it's two, but it's really one.
Okay, I can get that.
And it won't be in PDF, it'll be in Word so we can write on it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's two documents that are separated, but then combined into one when we distribute for ease, but it's two documents. One's process, one's form. I can send both.
All right, so for Cecilia and Christian, does that make sense what we're asking? Because we're asking for some technological assistance. Make sense?
Yeah.
In terms of what the town could do for us. Okay,
Can I just make a point of information here?
sure.
So the documents that Cecilia sent us for this meeting are already all in Word format. They were not PDFs. At least they came to me as, maybe just me, as Word documents. So everybody already has them, don't they?
But the
That
current.
was my initial
application,
question.
Rich,
That was my
And
initial question.
therefore, all we lack is the email from Laura saying, here's your homework assignment, please get it done by December 1st.
I don't think the current application was sent in Word format. I think those are all my documents.
Well, I'm just looking at the email I received yesterday, and they're all Word documents here.
Right, but those are what I did, Reg, not, can you guys see this?
Okay.
Not this.
Okay.
This needs to be in Word.
All right,
Yes,
Yeah.
I sent the PDF versions, Reg, earlier today.
got it. All right.
Okay,
Speaking as a rogue applicant, I just want to let you know that the first thing I do is convert the standard PDF documents back into Word, because it's very difficult to deal with the PDF as an applicant and cheat a little bit on the 100-word limit. The way Cecilia has the document set up, the moment you hit 100 words, the PDF cuts you off and that's it, you're dead.
if you violate that rule, you automatically are determined to be not eligible.
I was worried about that, but I figured I'd confess my sins up front here and throw myself at the mercy of the court. It's really quite difficult to deal with the PDF form, is all I'm trying to say more
Oh, that's a good,
practically.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
For
they're
example,
all, yeah.
I modified just this thing we talked about. I want to be able to say, here's the total funding, here's the 50%, here's the funding we're asking for the CPA, and to add that 50% of it's being matched by, funds from, leftover developer fees from the, from our last project. So, it's the inflexibility of using the editing tools in the PDF really make it very difficult. But probably I digress from our.
No, that's kind of part of the process that we should be looking at too. Okay.
And I do cheat on the number of words as well. So, but in the spirit of it being still brief and fitting on one page, you can fit more than 100 words on that second page in each two of the sections and still only have it be a one-page form without reducing the type to, font to 6 or something like that.
So it's good to know, Reg. I'll just white out everything that's after 100 words before I.
Okay. Okay, Bob Dermody.
I gotta go in 5 minutes, just so you know.
All right, well, I think we're wrapping up, okay? And so we do not have a resolution. We have our work cut out for us. And Cecilia will send us an email, I guess, just succinct, okay, stating in 100 words or less what our homework assignment is. And please don't cheat on that. And so with that, we will have, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And that's by Bob Dermody, second by Chris Gersel. And we'll have a roll call vote. Let's see, Joe Barnes,
Aye.
Bob Dermody,
Aye.
Laura Dorfman,
Aye.
Jean McKnight,
Aye.
Reg Foster,
Yes.
Chris Gersel,
Aye.
Artie Crocker.
Aye.
And Rick Simbone.
Aye, and happy Thanksgiving to you and your families.
Thank you,
And
Rick.
the
Thank
chair
you.
votes aye. Thank you very much, Rick.
Thank you,
And
Kristen.
Rick, you already
Appreciate it as
have,
always.
you do not need an email, Rick. You know what your assignment is, right?
I do, sir.
You're doing everything else that's not getting done.
It's not getting done here.
That's
Yeah,
your job.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, good.
Take care,
Okay.
guys.
Good night, all.
Since you